I was hanging from the city tower, and the leader of the rebel army arrogantly taunted my husband. "Young master, choose between your old lover and your wife." Beside us, Li Yao Yao said firmly, "Brother Sui An, don't worry about me. Quickly attack the city and tell the crown prince that I'll marry him in my next life." Two sharp arrows cut through the wind, and the rebels holding Li Yao Yao fell to the ground. I quietly watched as Shen Sui An and the crown prince rushed to Li Yao Yao's side, all crowding around her. No one noticed that my rope had already been cut.
1.
I died, falling to my death, splattering a large pool of blood. Before I closed my eyes, I heard Shen Sui An's pained scream, "Yao Yao." I found it laughable. I had given everything for him, and in the end, he could at least call my name. As a villainess, maybe it was worth it after all. I was an ordinary girl from the 21st century who was reborn into the role of a villainess in a romance novel. I cherished my life, even though my new identity was that of a beloved royal princess and the crown prince's sister. I always remembered that villainesses in such stories often end up with tragic fates, so I was cautious and tried to be a model citizen of ancient times. Logically, I should have survived to see a perfect ending. However, the mistake was in my involvement with a deeply affectionate second male lead who was only meant for the heroine. In the end, I died. The rebels forced the crown prince and Shen Sui An to choose between me and the heroine, Li Yao Yao. One was my brother, the other my husband, and they both went to the heroine's side. My death was ugly, and before I died, I had to watch my lover and brother surround the heroine.
1.
I was reborn again, this time into the body of a young girl who had not yet reached the age of 16. By then, my dear crown prince brother had been the emperor for 10 stable years. It turned out I had been dead for 10 years. For others, 10 years might seem long, but for me, it felt like yesterday. The sensation of falling from the tower and having blood block my nose and mouth still lingered, and I've been too afraid to climb high places since then. My new identity is Kong Yunyang. I lost my father at a young age and was raised by my mother, who supported our family. I also have an older brother, a staunch believer in sister first. Our small family lived a warm life in a little town until I saved enough money from selling food to send my brother to the capital for the imperial examination.
What?
You want to take me and Yunyang to the capital and never come back? My mother was shocked by my brother's suggestion. "Mother, I'm confident I'll pass the exam this year. Besides, our Kong family is from the capital, and our ancestral home is still there." My brother reassured my mother, explaining his plan in detail. "Father died at the hands of the rebels. I know it's painful for you to think of him, but our roots are in the capital. Don't you want to offer paper money at his grave during Qingming? Besides, Yunyang is growing more beautiful. This place is remote and unsafe, and the county magistrate has hinted a few times about taking Yunyang as a concubine. I work hard in my studies to provide for you and Yunyang. My sister will never be a concubine. Once I achieve success, I'll find her a good husband. We must move as soon as possible, far away from this filthy place." My mother was persuaded, and thus the Kong family moved to the capital, just like the ancient story of Meng Mu's 3 relocations. Lying in the cabin with my mother at night, listening to the sound of water slapping against the boat, I couldn't sleep. In 3 days, we'd reached the capital. With my current identity, I'd likely have little chance to interact with my old acquaintances. If that's the case, it would be for the best.
1.
Living in the capital is not easy. After cleaning the old house and adding some furniture, our family awkwardly discovered that we were so poor we had only 1 bed left. Despite it being a crucial time for him to prepare for exams, my brother took on some copywork jobs. At night, he even gave up the only blanket to me and my mother, sleeping fully clothed. I have a problem with feeling cold, so my mother always warms my feet by holding them close to her chest at night. Though our lives were modest, they were happy. Today, the weather was great. I carefully lifted the burlap covering the wooden barrel and saw the yellow-green sprouts. I sighed in relief. Finally, the beans that my brother had spent 3 days copying books to obtain had sprouted in all 5 barrels. Once we sell them all, My brother won't need to copy books anymore and can focus on his studies. I was so busy that I didn't notice my brother had come closer until I felt a hairpin in my hair. The hairpin's quality was far less than the ones I used to give to my servants, but the young man in the sunlight smiled with warmth. Yunyang, I don't have the means to buy you fine jewelry now, but I won't be incapable forever. I stared blankly at his retreating figure, my mind swirling with the contrast between my past and present circumstances. In the 21st century, I was an orphan. Suddenly reborn into a life with both parents and an older brother, I was naturally overjoyed. Though I knew my previous self was a villainess, I firmly believed that as long as I stayed out of trouble, I could live a stable life. The original story misled me. I only knew that my previous self was a spoiled princess, deeply loved by her family, but I never expected the royal family to be so heartless, driven by interests. In my past life, the crown prince and I were siblings, both born of the empress. However, the empress dowager disliked the empress, so I was taken in by another family. Without the empress's permission, the empress could not see me. Thus, I became a pawn in the royal family's power struggle. Though the empress appeared to grant me whatever I wanted, there was always a barrier between us, as if she feared I was aligned with the empress dowager. The emperor cared only for his sons. My several older sisters were married off to foreign lands for alliances, and if I hadn't been the legitimate princess, I might have met the same fate. My crown prince brother resented me for causing more discord between the empress and the empress dowager, and he never had a kind word for me. As for Shen Sui An, well, I'd rather not think about it. I gently touched my hair, while my mother was downstairs sewing shoe soles in my size. The familial love I couldn't have in my past life is finally complete in this one.
4.
A little over a month after arriving in the capital, I had managed to save up some silver from small business ventures. Though it wasn't much, it was enough for our family of 3 to get through the harsh winter. My brother no longer had to strain his eyes copying books, and my mother could take on fewer embroidery jobs. One day, I set up my stall next to the vendor selling roasted taro, just as usual. I was thin-skinned and had been bullied and squeezed for prices when I first started. It was this vendor who stood up for me. Why do you always pick on young girls? If you're so capable, come and argue with me. Just because they're young, you think you can take advantage. Don't you have any sisters or daughters at home? Her words were sharp and loud, sending the bullies fleeing. Afterward, I thanked her with a bow, and she laughed heartily. When I was young and selling goods to support my family, I was also bullied. Once, luckily, a princess came to my aid. You know, your bowing actually looks just like a princess. I was taken aback, looking at this lively and straightforward woman. A familiar yet youthful face vaguely appeared in my mind. At that time, when I had just married Shen Sui An, he was always thinking about the heroine and treated me poorly. He was like a hedgehog. When I tried to embrace him, he curled up and aimed all his spines at me. But I didn't even like him before the marriage. It was the crown prince who told me that his throne was surrounded by rivals and that the empress dowager had always disliked our mother. To protect his and our mother's position, I had to marry the military leader Shen family. Before the wedding, I specifically asked Shen Sui An, "Young Master Shen, speak honestly. Are you still pining for your old lover? If so, I will explain to the emperor that I am unwilling to marry you." In the spring, peach blossoms fell on his shoulders, and the young man's eyes sparkled with a carefree charm. I admit, I was somewhat tempted by his looks, after all. He was the handsome second male lead in the novel. "Your Highness, I will only be good to my wife, protect her and honor her. As for old flames, they are just past memories." Shen Sui An was a good actor, but unfortunately, on the wedding day, after the veil was lifted, he was unwilling to continue the act. I married the princess to reassure everyone. "Princess, let's respect each other as guests from now on." He turned and went to the study to rest, and until my death, he never spent a night with me. At that time, I stubbornly believed in the principle of reciprocation. If I was good to others, they would be good to me. Plus, feeling stifled in the Shen household, I often wandered outside with my maid, always looking for little things to bring to Shen Sui An. Grasshoppers, bamboo cricket cages, clay figurines of myself. Looking back, it's quite the reversal. I ended up doing all the things a man would do. One day, as I sat in a carriage, admiring the ancient street scenery through the curtain, I suddenly heard a young girl crying. "Uncle, the price you're offering won't even cover my costs. I'm the only one earning for my family right now. My father just broke his leg. Please, don't make things hard for me." I called my maid to inquire about the situation. "Your Highness, there are scoundrels bullying this young girl. They're not buying taro. They're robbing her." The girl's crying tugged at my heart, so I had the guards help her. She insisted on meeting me to thank me. When I lifted the curtain, I saw a face covered in tears and snot, holding 2 taros. I couldn't help but smile. "Little girl, you can't do business like this. People will take advantage of you if they see you're weak. You need to be more assertive." I took the taros from her hands and gave her 10 taels of silver. She shook her head in fear, but I couldn't bear her pitiful appearance, so I stuffed the money into her arms. "This princess is willing to pay 10 taels for your taros, which means they're worth that price. After all, it's rare to find a filial daughter. You can also tell others that Princess Fu and praised your taros and paid 10 taels for them." 10 years felt like a dream. The once timid girl could now protect me in return. But old acquaintances are unrecognizable now.
1.
Before my business could even start, a group of officers suddenly arrived, herding us small vendors to the sides of the street like sheepdogs. "The emperor is returning from the outskirts of the capital. Commoners must not look directly at him. All of you, bow your heads and kneel." I stood in a daze, and as the officers were about to lose their tempers, the vendor grabbed me and pulled me down. I knelt on the ground, while the vendor, rolling her eyes, muttered, "People don't cherish life while they're alive, but cry all day after death. They come to the outskirts every year to weep. Don't dirty our noble's path in the cycle of reincarnation." Even the ghosts roll their eyes at their mourning. I, like the multitude, pressed my forehead to the ground in reverent submission. The passing procession was so grand that it stirred up dust, blurring my vision. Otherwise, why would my sight be so hazy? Suddenly, a volley of arrows rained down. The vendor, panicking, tried to pull me away, but was swept away by the chaotic crowd. She reverted to her fearful, timid self. "Yunyang, quickly find a place to hide." However, I was already pushed into the circle of assassins attacking the royal procession. I crawled forward, hugging my head. As long as I could get close to the royal carriage surrounded by guards, there might be a chance of survival. I hadn't seen if my brother had passed the exams, and the winter shoes my mother started making just yesterday might not fit me. If I died, they would surely be heartbroken. I was almost there, just one step away, when a cold, glinting arrow struck right in front of me with a thunderous force. A cold, emotionless male voice rang out, as if speaking to ants. "Commoners are not allowed near the royal carriage." My heart tightened. This voice had always used cold, formal words with me in my past life. I looked up, and Shen Sui An's eyes were fixed on me like a hawk on its prey. Behind him was a carriage adorned with phoenix carvings, the standard of the empress. Shen Sui An was still loyally by Li Yao Yao's side. I felt a gust of wind behind me and turned around, only to see the assassin's knife coming straight at me.
1.
"Young master, save me." Perhaps I had grown attached to this world, and I found myself calling out for Shen Sui An's help. He acted decisively, his spear slicing through the air and cutting off a strand of my hair. Warm blood sprayed onto my face as the fierce assassin was swiftly dispatched. Before I could even rejoice in my narrow escape, the spear was pressed against my forehead. Through the blood-red haze, I met his gaze. His hand was trembling, the once majestic spear now quivering in the wind. His eyes were restrained and red-rimmed, and he spoke through gritted teeth. "Tell me, why did you call me young master?" I was momentarily stunned, but quickly realized the reason. The old duke had passed away 10 years ago in a rebellion, and now everyone referred to Shen Sui An as Dukin. Why was he reacting so strongly to just a title? Never mind, I shouldn't get entangled in this. Better to gloss over it. I'm just a simple, ignorant girl. In the countryside, young officials in plays are often called young master, so I thought it was a respectful title for someone like you. If I've offended you, please forgive me. I'm just a country girl, lacking understanding. I looked terrified, bowing my head on the ground with blood on my face, forcing out a few tears. I knew I must look quite disheveled. He looked at me with suspicion, remaining silent, simply watching me cry. I had cried before him in my previous life. I couldn't bear his indifference and the mixed looks of sympathy and mockery from those in the household. I cried out, asking if I was doomed to be the victim in the love triangle between him, Li Yao Yao, and the Crown Prince. Since the Crown Prince and Li Yao Yao were already betrothed and the Shen family was behind the future emperor and empress, why not let me go? Let us part ways with dignity. He refused me with a blank expression. Princess, you are the most esteemed lady in the Shen household. Besides not being able to love you, everything else is yours to command. If we were to part ways, the Crown Prince and Yao Yao would be angered and troubled by our affair. Please understand and do not burden others. I hope they remain happy forever. I slapped him in anger, crying out hoarsely, but I'm a person. I'm not a cold porcelain figurine. I want to be loved. My parents and brothers don't love me, and neither do you as my husband. Why won't anyone consider that I am a living, breathing person? Even grass dogs have their mothers to lick their fur. What about me? What about me? What did Shen Sui An do at that time? He handed me a dagger with a look of shock. Princess, if you're unhappy, you might as well use this dagger to cut my flesh and vent your anger. I resisted and retreated, dropping the dagger. He left with the words, if you don't want to, then don't say such things. It's a headache, and went back to his study.
1.
Report to Lorden. All the assassins have been captured or killed. His Majesty fears that the Empress Dowager and the princesses and princes might be in danger, so he commands you to return and guard the royal carriage. The appearance of the messenger broke the tense standoff. Shen Sui An sheathed his spear and mounted his warhorse. He gave me one last deep look before turning the horse and leaving. I remained kneeling until the entire procession had moved away, before daring to rise. I turned and fell into a warm embrace. It was my brother. He used a handkerchief to carefully wipe the blood from my face, inspecting my hairline layer by layer. The pulling on my scalp made me wince in pain. Brother, I'm fine. That was the assassin's blood. He sighed in relief. Sister, you mustn't get into trouble again. Get into trouble again? I asked, puzzled. My brother, usually calm, looked flustered. What I mean is, with our father gone, if anything happens to you, Mother would be heartbroken. His words made me feel cherished. I smiled and comforted him. Don't worry, brother. Your sister is smart and careful. Unexpectedly, his face darkened, and he gave me a rap on the head. Nonsense. You're always careless and have poor eyesight. I'm always worried you might get bumped into by pedestrians. I held my head and circled around him, apologizing, while the taro vendor once again came to my rescue. Stop your bickering, you two. The charcoal fire is still burning. Let's get some hot water to wash up and go home. Otherwise, your mother will be terrified seeing you like this. I then noticed that my brother's long robe was covered in dirt, as if he had fallen and gotten dirty, and his hairpin was somewhat disheveled. The sky, calm and serene after the chaos, was an especially peaceful blue. I couldn't help but reflect. It's good. I'm unharmed. The taro vendor is helping us with hot water, and my brother has come to take me home.
1.
Spring came in the blink of an eye. With my brother's exams approaching, Mother had heard that the hidden peace temple in the outskirts of the capital was very effective, so she had gone early to queue for a spot. Today it was finally our turn. We prepared our belongings early in the morning, intending to fast for 3 days at the temple to pray for my brother's success. The hidden peace temple was vast and solemn. It was said that the royal family had come recently to pray. I knelt before the myriad deities, bowing deeply and silently making my wishes. 1. Did I thank the flowers for blooming again? 2. Did I thank for all regrets being fulfilled? 3. Did I wish for my loved ones to have smooth and successful lives? After finishing my prayers, I noticed that Mother was missing. Probably she had gone to tie a red ribbon, so I followed her to the large banyan tree in the courtyard. Mother was on tiptoe, stretching her arms, trying to throw a red silk onto the highest branch of the banyan tree, chanting, "May the Bodhisattva bless my child with a safe life and fulfill all her wishes." I found it amusing and was about to help her when I was startled by another woman under the tree. The woman had fair skin and an aristocratic demeanor, mimicking Mother's actions with the red silk. She was surrounded by well-dressed maidservants and a delicate, beardless young servant. That was my mother in my previous life, or rather, now I should call her the Empress Dowager. Mother was so naive, not realizing that the woman she was joking with was extraordinary. I quickly grabbed Mother's arm, pulling her away. "Mother, leaving me behind to run off here made me search high and low for you. Let's go eat. I've heard the temple's vegetarian food is excellent." Mother, blushing slightly with a hint of pride, introduced me to the Empress Dowager. "This is my gluttonous daughter, Yunyang."
Please don't laugh.
She only acts spoiled in front of me and her brother. Normally, she supports half the household with her own hands. The Empress Dowager appeared dazed at first, but then suddenly brightened with a smile. "She's a good girl. My little Yu Yu is very obedient. She listens to everything I and her brother say and never gives me trouble. I don't get along with my mother-in-law, and several times it was Yu Yu who punished me by kneeling. Her brother complained about the ink pad, so she made a whole lot of lotus root threads for him. Her hands were full of small cuts. Oh dear, she must be a wonderful girl.
How old is she?
She must be married by now, right? Such a good girl must have a sought-after husband." Mother was excited when talking about her children, but she didn't notice the Empress Dowager's expression suddenly turn fierce. I sensed something was wrong and quickly pulled Mother away, moving her away from the Empress Dowager. The palace maids and eunuchs became chaotic, shouting, "Quick, fetch the masters."
1.
The elegant and dignified old woman was acting like a madwoman, tearing her hair apart and clutching her neck in extreme agony. That old witch ruined my daughter and me. My Yu Yu was barely 20 when she died. It's the mother's fault. She shouldn't have been deceived by the old witch. The Empress Dowager's wails were like a tigress who had lost her cub. She kept lamenting my previous life's name with such sorrow and regret, but at this moment, I was only concerned about the timid and ordinary woman beside me, my real mother. "Mother, I'm sorry, Yu. All these years, why haven't you ever come into my dreams? I can't even find a single portrait of you. Boo-hoo. Ha 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 ha." Suddenly, the Empress Dowager burst into laughter and rushed towards me, grabbing my arm with such force that I feared it would turn blue. "You are my Yu Yu, right? The monk said Yu Yu is here, but she's just heartbroken and unwilling to recognize me." She held me tightly in her embrace with such strength that I couldn't break free, as if trying to merge all the embraces she owed me from my past life into this one. "Yu Yu, let me tell you, I've avenged you. I took Li Yao Yao's child and raised him as my own, and now they don't even recognize their real mother. Ha ha ha, I even gave Shen Sui An a sterilization potion. He will remain a widower for life." That old witch. She only told me after her death that you never did anything for her. That old witch. She's so malicious. I felt a bit dizzy, probably from lack of oxygen. My mother anxiously tried to pull the Empress Dowager away, but was stopped by the eunuchs and palace maids who restrained her. "How dare you? Don't harm our old lady." My mother's voice grew tearful with urgency. "Please, let go of her. My daughter is being suffocated. She is my daughter. You've mistaken her." The Empress Dowager increased her grip, fiercely declaring, "Nonsense. She is my Yu Yu, my daughter."
1.
Amida Budja. The sound of the Buddhist chant came, and the Empress Dowager suddenly softened. A young palace maid expertly caught her as she collapsed. My mother, having lost control, hurriedly pulled me into her arms. "It's my fault. My daughter suffered because of me." I quietly rested on my mother's thin shoulder and shook my head silently. After my mother's sorrow, She remembered to thank the monk who had saved me. "Thank you so much, master. We are truly at a loss for how to repay you." The monk gave a slight nod to my mother and said nothing more. He was accompanied by a tall man, Shen Sui An. Both of them stared intently at me, as if searching for another person through me. Remembering the Empress Dowager's words earlier, I was startled. Experiencing time travel and rebirth firsthand, I knew that there could indeed be people who knew the past and future. I subtly scratched my mother's palm and said sweetly, "Mother, I want to go eat." Still concerned for me, my mother immediately set aside the crowd and guided me to the dining hall. As we turned the corner, I glanced back secretly and caught Shen Sui An's gaze. I saw his lips move, clearly uttering the words "Yu." I was extremely flustered but forced myself to appear calm. It doesn't matter. As long as I refuse to admit it, who would believe I am someone who has already died? Besides, my existence isn't important. Today was the last day of fasting. My mother said she would go to the dining hall to help in gratitude for the master's assistance. Before leaving, she reminded me not to wander around and to be cautious of any trouble. Bored, I lay on the bed with my legs crossed, reading a scripture. Soon, I felt drowsy and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I found myself lying in a strange grand hall with Buddhist statues I had never seen before. Other Buddhist statues were either kind or solemn, some holding a pure water bottle or gently holding a lotus flower. But this Buddhist statue had an expression resembling the famous yellow comic meme from the 21st century. What was worse, it had its middle finger raised to the sky, as if taunting the heavens. And even worse, the hall was the largest I had ever seen. The Buddha's golden body was indeed made of gold, with a dumpling skin on its head adorned with gems.
1.
Creak. Someone opened the door and entered. I quickly closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. I felt legs stop beside me and then remained still. After a while, the person spoke, as I had expected. It was Shen Sui An. "Stop pretending. I know the dosage of the medicine I used. You should have woken up before I came in."
You.
I could no longer keep up the pretense and stood up directly. "Isn't it a bit petty of you? Just because I called you by the wrong title last time, you kidnapped me? Or are you like the noble lady from the other day, also afflicted with madness and seeking a daughter everywhere? Don't tell me, you really could have a daughter my age. I'm in need of a rich and powerful father." He shut his eyes in pain, taking out a small clay figurine from his sleeve and holding it up to me. The paint on the figurine had faded, and its cracks looked like the legs of a centipede, but I still recognized it as the small statue my master had made during my previous life, after standing for an incense stick. Oh, where did such an ugly figurine come from? I disdainfully waved my hand, deliberately knocking the figurine to the ground, causing it to crumble instantly. Shen Sui An hurriedly knelt to pick up the pieces, but I accidentally stepped on them, turning them into powder. He remained on the ground, covering his face and crying. "Yu, Master Juehui said you were reborn in this body. I know you are Yu. Please forgive me. I beg you to forgive me. I was young and stubborn back then, and I resented that you stole my former beloved from me. I did many inhumane things to you. I deserve to be punished." Suddenly, he started hitting himself. I coldly watched his ridiculous behavior and didn't want to engage, but feared confirming my identity, so I had to pretend to be a frightened young girl. I screamed, "Help! The official is possessed. It's terrible. The official is possessed." Chaos ensued outside as a crowd of servants rushed in, stunned by Shen Sui An's appearance. Taking the opportunity, I fled through the door, with Shen Sui An's desperate cries trailing behind. "Yu, I truly have feelings for you." I realized it too late. I took the sterilization potion given by the Empress Dowager myself because I failed to protect you. I ignored him and ran without looking back. I've been dead for years, and now they come crying. I was unfilial in life. My mother is now mourning. Even ghosts would roll their eyes. They all deserve the disdain of the comical Buddha. How unfortunate. I need to hurry and get my mother away.
1.
That night, I had a dream where the comical Buddha was giving me the middle finger. I felt disrespected and tried to confront him, but he slowly retracted the middle finger and raised his thumb instead. Upon waking, I felt a deep sense of loss, as if my two reincarnations were hiding something crucial that I had forgotten. The imperial examination soon passed, and I was surprised to see my brother, so capable, parading through the streets as the celebrated top scholar. The examination this time produced many talents, and the emperor, in his delight, invited the successful candidates and their families to a grand banquet in the palace. The scale of the banquet was enormous, with officials of all ages and the new emperor's students gathered together, leaving the female guests overwhelmed. The emperor and empress sat in high positions, surrounded by various palace concubines and beauties. I noticed Li Yao Yao's smile had faded, while the emperor appeared radiant. I had always known that an emperor would have a vast harem. Even for the stability of the previous dynasty, he would have to distribute his favor evenly. But I wondered if, in the middle of the night, Li Yao Yao regretted not choosing the devoted second male lead. Feeling a bit frustrated, I excused myself from my family and asked a palace maid to take me outside for some fresh air. While navigating through the palace corridors, I sensed something was wrong, but it was too late. Shen Sui An had already appeared in front of me. I intended to greet him as I would other officials and then pass by, but he directly grabbed my hand. I will ask His Majesty for a marriage decree. The mistakes of 10 years ago should be corrected. He looked at me with deep affection, but I felt a chill. I screamed and tried to free myself, but his grip tightened. Please, Lord Duke, release my younger sister. If I have offended you, please forgive me. My brother arrived just in time. I called out for help urgently. Brother, hit him. Save me. All right.
1.
Indeed, my brother rolled up his sleeves, and Shen Sui An, probably not expecting that a mere top scholar would dare strike a duke, did not retaliate. I easily broke free from his grip. Shen Sui An suddenly bent over, laughing uncontrollably. Brother? Your brother is sitting on the dragon throne. I felt an unprecedented unease. Shen Sui An still wanted to take away my family. Shut up. Are you trying to get yourself killed by involving the royal family? I'm not done living yet. But Shen Sui An ignored me, continuing his own speech. Top scholar, you probably didn't expect this. Your sister's body has been replaced long ago. If you don't believe it, ask Master Juehui. He is a disciple of the future Buddha. The current Kong Yunyang is not Kong Yunyang. She is the late Princess Fuan, the emperor's younger sister. My face turned red, and I cautiously glanced at my brother's expression, only to see him suddenly smiling. He gave me a flick on the forehead, took my hand, and turned to leave this place of trouble. Don't you feel sad? Your real sister is gone. Shen Sui An, still not giving up, continued to sow discord. My brother finally spoke. She has always been my sister. Only I know that her taste in men has always been poor. My brother lowered his head and touched his forehead to mine. Isn't that right, Grape?
1.
Memories flooded back, nearly overwhelming me. On a gray, damp, rainy day, the gravestone of a snail, a young boy stubbornly holding the hand of a little girl who barely reached his knee. Adults dressed in black attending the funeral shook their heads and sighed. How pitiful. The adults were all swept away by the mountain flood. These two children, one at school, the other in the hospital, narrowly escaped. How will they live on? This child has a congenital eye defect and is blind. No one is willing to adopt them. Chengzi won't leave his sister behind, insisting on raising her himself. He says the elder brother should be like a father. The boy, shirtless and sunburned, wandered under a grape arbor, cutting a bunch of purple grapes and smiling at the little girl eating ice cream under an umbrella. Be good, Grape. Look, our parents are watching over us. This year's grape harvest is good. I'll soon be able to take grape for surgery and give some to the uncles and aunts in the street and district committee who have helped us. I stood dazed in a grand hall where mournful music played. On a platform made of chrysanthemums and white cloth, the boy's exuberant smile was captured in a black and white photograph. Many people came and went, and I could only look up at their knees, with some taking pictures of me. This report, 19-year-old Huang Qingzi, who worked at a construction site during summer vacation, was unfortunately crushed by steel bars and died despite rescue efforts. Before his death, he left a will to donate his corneas to his sister. Compensation funds are managed by the relevant departments and issued monthly to his sister. Huang Qingzi and his sister are orphans, their parents having passed away long ago. The memories ended, and I had already cried into my brother's embrace, his lips bitten until they bled. Brother, why did you leave me behind? I don't want eye treatment. I just want you. Brother, does it hurt? Does it hurt? Tears fell on my head, making my heart ache. Brother, doesn't hurt, really, it doesn't hurt. It's over once you close your eyes. You don't feel it. When has brother ever lied to little Grape? I struggled in pain, stamping my feet. You're lying? It hurts. It hurts.
1.
In my current state, I couldn't continue attending the banquet. Fortunately, the emperor and empress had already returned to their chambers, leaving only officials drinking. My brother had mother escorted out. Seeing my tear-streaked face, she was startled, but my brother interrupted before she could ask anything. Mother, Yunyang and I had a dispute. She's throwing a tantrum and crying. Mother, hearing this, sighed with relief and scolded me with a smile. How old are you to still be throwing tantrums? Such a troublemaker. Back home, we sent mother to rest. My brother and I sat silently in the study until I finally spoke. Brother, can you answer my question?
Sure.
Was it because of you that I had 2 reincarnations?
No.
After I died, our parents asked the messenger for another chance at life, willing to give a portion of their future blessings. That's how I ended up in this small world. After your accident in the original world, our parents again gave a portion of their blessings to the messenger, bringing you here. After you fell from the city wall and died, I also gave a portion of my blessings to the messenger, who found a passerby's family and altered their memories. We became their children. Tears welled up again. The so-called reincarnation and rebirth, behind what seemed like a hopeless life, were repeated acts of rescue by family. They weren't by my side, but repeatedly created chances for me to live. Can I meet our parents? I've forgotten what they look like. My brother shook his head gently. They must have become someone else's little babies by now. I was deeply uneasy, but they gave us so many blessings. In the next life, don't worry. The messenger said she wouldn't take those blessings because your actions pleased her. My brother shook his head and laughed lightly. The messenger is really interesting. A beautiful woman, loves gossip, greedy, and has terrible taste in clothes. For some reason, the comical Buddha giving me a thumbs up immediately came to mind. Brother, is the messenger the one with a dumpling skin on her head and always giving the middle finger? My brother was surprised. You've seen her? I thought perhaps I had.
1.
While my brother and I were still basking in the joy of our reunion, Shen Sui An was far from finished with his scheming. Kong Yunyang, what makes you think my Duke of Ngu is not worthy of you? Why are you unwilling to marry him? I was kneeling in the emperor's study, with the emperor, empress, and Shen Sui An all waiting for my response. I had intended to play the fool, but before I left, my brother had told me to speak freely. He had his own plans. Taking a deep breath, I said, Your Majesty, the age difference is too great. Duke Ngu is old enough to be my father. How ridiculous. How many girls in the capital wish to marry Duke Ngu? How dare you reject him? Li Yao Yao's face, now more wrinkled and temperamental, only added to my resolve to provoke her. Your Majesty, when I first arrived in the capital, I heard stories about you, Duke Ngu, and the late Princess Fuan. Duke Ngu always seeks what is lost and does not appreciate those around him. I do not want to follow the path of Princess Fuan. The emperor's face darkened, while Li Yao Yao turned pale. You are Yu. You were always meant to be my wife. Shen Sui An was losing his mind again. I knocked my head repeatedly. Your Majesty, see for yourselves, Duke Ngu is mad. He wants to use me as a substitute. The emperor shattered an exquisite inkstone and said coldly, Kong family Yunyang, I will now draft a decree to marry you to Dukangu. I dare anyone to try. I was startled. The Empress Dowager had entered the room at some point, holding a sword, with my brother following her. The Empress Dowager drew her sword and attacked the emperor on the dragon throne, shouting, You all deserve to die. You are plotting to use my Yuyu.
Ah.
Li Yao Yao's scream summoned the guards, but it was too late. The emperor's left hand was severed, and Li Yao Yao's face was also injured. My brother acted decisively, grabbing the sword from the Empress Dowager's hand and thrusting it into Shen Sui An's. Dukangu is having a psychotic episode and has injured the emperor. Seize him quickly. The guards rushed in. Everyone knew the truth, but the royal family's reputation must be preserved at all costs. Whether it's patricide or matricide, such scandals were intolerable. Shen Sui An had to take the blame, since it all started with him.
1.
My brother and I took advantage of the chaos to leave the palace. Mother was waiting for us outside the palace walls with the carriage. Our ancestral home had a good location and sold for a nice price. I heard that the state of Yu in the south is the most prosperous and powerful, and my brother had received a recommendation from a friend during his studies abroad. I wondered if he could become a celebrated scholar in Yu, parading through the streets. Early spring was warming up, making it a good season. Extra, brother. I found a way to fill my stomach with minimal money at the school cafeteria. I'd skip the vegetables and just get 3 yuan worth of rice, pouring the free soup over it for the most delicious rice soup. At this stage, I was scraping by, my body lacking nourishment, thin and long like a bamboo pole. Society and the school provided me with much help. They arranged student loans and poverty subsidies. My grades were good, and I received a national scholarship every year. But I was habitually frugal because there were no adults in the family, and I had a sister who needed surgery. I thought if I saved a bit more, I could afford to send my sister to the best kindergarten and have the best surgery. I didn't want to use people's sympathy to beg. Teachers and classmates often tried to treat me to meals. They feared hurting my pride and would come up with excuses, even celebrating the school's stray cat's romance. Uncles and aunts from the neighborhood often brought things for my sister and me. They had organized everything when our parents passed away and even arranged for us to receive subsistence allowances. Aside from the heavens not being kind to me, everyone around me treated me very well. Though we were poor, perhaps our parents in heaven couldn't bear to see us suffer too much and blessed us with a bountiful grape harvest. During the summer vacation of my freshman year, I did nothing but pick grapes every day, then took them to the market to sell. With no one to look after my sister, I would bring her along, wearing a hat and holding an umbrella under the grape arbor. The sun burned my back painfully, but I felt happy. I managed to save up some more for my sister's surgery and could also give some grapes to those who helped us. At the market, my sister slept in the shade of the carriage with her favorite Peppa Pig blanket. Thanks to her, people who came to buy grapes were too embarrassed to haggle. There was even a burly man with flower tattoos who left 200 yuan and ran away. When I chased him, I found he was wiping away tears. Everyone thought we were orphans and felt sorry for us, but I didn't see it that way. How could we be orphans? After all, I had grapes, and grapes had me as her brother. We still had family ties in this world. A week before the school term started, my grapes were sold out. I thought about finding another part-time job. A neighbor lady who liked children was willing to watch my sister. Working on a construction site for 300 yuan a day, I could save up 4,500 yuan by the start of the term, covering living expenses. Getting pierced by steel bars was very painful. In the operating room, my consciousness blurred, and I could hear the doctors and nurses sighing. I couldn't leave like this. I had a 4-year-old sister to take care of. I used the last of my strength to grasp a corner of a sheet and whispered, whether or not they could hear. There is still 10,000 yuan at home. Use it to pay off the student loan. Compensation from the construction site should go to the government. Let them pay my sister monthly. My eyes should go to my sister. As consciousness slipped away, I heard many people sobbing around me. Grape, I'm sorry. Life is so bitter. Brother is leaving you first. Extra. Spring and clear skies. The capital of Chun City was exceptionally lively at the moment. Passers-by, street vendors, and foot soldiers lined both sides of the streets, craning their necks to see. The usually reclusive girls in the restaurants along the street also peered out with their shy faces. Among the crowd, a young nobleman complained angrily. "Why is it that I am less than that Kong fellow? Why have both Chunhua and Shuyue fallen for him?" His friend took a sip of tea, silently observing his friend's bald head. Knowing that the topic of baldness was a sore spot for him, and touch it at one's peril, he wisely changed the subject. "Brother, you are indeed not lacking. However, Kong is simply extraordinary. He is handsome, exceptionally skilled, and highly respectful to women. He cares for his sister and his mother, and now he has passed the imperial exams as the top scholar, the only one among the emperor's personal students. The entire city's girls are going crazy, swearing to have him accept their perfume sachets today. Even the old ministers are putting their pride aside, all trying to catch him as a son-in-law. The Minister of Revenue and the General of the Guards even fought over it, with the Minister of Works intervening, only to have his beard torn off. In their anger, they complained to the emperor, who in turn bestowed upon them the title, Old Fools. The bald young man's mouth dropped open, and he downed 3 cups of hot tea to soothe his wounded spirit. The top scholar is here. The commotion downstairs grew, with people of all ages holding fruits and flowers, and the girls upstairs displaying embroidered handkerchiefs and perfume sachets. The gong sounded, and 2 teams of attendants holding signs walked by, followed by a horse adorned with red flowers. Looking up, the young man sitting on the horse was indeed handsome and charming. His gaze swept across the crowd and then fixed on one spot, his eyes filled with a smile. The crowd went wild at that smile. The top scholar smiled at me. "My maids, let's throw things. Don't be ridiculous." He was clearly smiling at me. Fruits, flowers, sachets, and embroidered handkerchiefs flew in all directions. Some children even threw their own calligraphy works, lifted by their fathers. The accompanying attendants wiped sweat from their foreheads, fearing the top scholar might be injured by the flying objects. But who was the top scholar smiling at? Curiously, they followed his gaze to see a pair of rather lovely mother and daughter who were being entertained by a chubby little boy. The chubby boy looked quite familiar, resembling the son of the prime minister. "Yunyang, let me tell you, when my father was the top scholar, the parade was just as grand as our elder brothers. So you can imagine how handsome my father was. Once I lose weight, I will be even better looking than my father. You mustn't marry anyone. You have to wait for me." Spring was warm and clear, flowers lined the roads, and everyone was smiling. The attendants even cleaned their ears in disbelief. What happiness! Extra. Yunyang and Qingyuan. Gu Qingyuan's eldest brother was the friend who introduced my brother to you. When we first arrived in Yu, it was he who welcomed us and arranged for us to stay at the Prime Minister's residence, which is how I came to know Gu Qingyuan. At our first meeting, I only saw a plump, white, glutinous rice ball in front of me. It wasn't until he smiled and greeted me with a bow that I realized he was the most favored young master of the Prime Minister's family. The Prime Minister's family was very kind. Knowing that my brother was about to take the imperial exams, they arranged for us to live in a quiet courtyard away from the main house. They even offered us servants to assist with daily needs, which we politely declined. My mother picked up her needle and thread again, and this time, Gu Qingyuan, with his fair and tender skin, was added to the list of people who wore her handmade clothes and shoes. If anyone in the Prime Minister's household welcomed us most warmly, it was Gu Qingyuan. When we moved into the Prime Minister's residence, Gu Qingyuan was in a state of distress, and the reason was rather amusing. Despite the power and prestige of the Prime Minister's household, 18-year-old Gu Qingyuan couldn't find a bride because the young ladies thought he was too chubby and looked like a little brother rather than a suitor. The Prime Minister's wife decided to cut his food intake by half. He wasn't allowed to touch any rich, greasy food until he lost weight to the average level of Chun City's young nobles. At that time, I was unaware of the family's internal troubles and focused on preparing meals to help my brother regain his strength. However, I noticed that every time I uncovered the pot of soup I made, it seemed to have diminished by half. I was puzzled. Even if there were stray cats, it was unlikely they could lift the steaming pot lid.
I told my brother about this.
While drinking the soup, my brother frowned, tapping his fingers on the table. After finishing the soup, he smiled and said, "It's not stray cats. It's clearly mice and big, fat ones." That night, following my brother's instructions, I prepared a beggar's chicken, wrapping it in lotus leaves and yellow clay before burying it in a small fire pit in the courtyard. Before going inside to rest, my brother intentionally spoke loudly. "Yunyang, this beggar's chicken is best when cooked in the mud fire for an hour. Let's go rest first, and we'll come back in an hour to enjoy it." I didn't understand his intention, but usually listened to him and went to rest obediently. However, I thought I might have imagined it, but I thought I heard the sound of someone licking their lips coming from the bushes behind me. I was woken from a deep sleep by my brother calling me. It was the first time I saw such a mischievous expression on his face. "Yunyang, get up quickly. We've caught the big mouse." Confused, I peeked through the door crack and saw a large glutinous rice ball outside, and everything made sense. I felt both amused and exasperated. Under the bright moonlight, Gu Qingyuan was squatting by the fire pit where we buried the beggar's chicken, trying to dig it out. Perhaps the residual heat had burned him, and he made a hiss sound but quickly covered his mouth to avoid making too much noise. My brother and I watched through the door crack as he struggled to dig out the chicken. Just as he was about to break through the clay and taste it, my brother called out loudly, "Qingyan, you're here." Gu Qingyan was my brother's friend and Gu Qingyuan's elder brother. Gu Qingyuan stood frozen, and when we approached, he saw the smiles on our faces and realized we had been playing a trick on him. His lips trembled slightly. We were all waiting for a reasonable explanation from him, but he suddenly fainted. Luckily, my brother caught him, and he slumped against my brother like a mountain. I went to fetch a doctor, but he woke up and said, "Good sister, don't go. I'm just hungry." Later, Gu Qingyuan, with his newly slim figure and his once pouty lips, won my mother's heart and naturally became an unofficial member of our family's dining table. However, my brother was always displeased. He went out of his way to avoid leaving me alone with Gu Qingyuan. When I asked why, my brother said, "Gu Qingyuan, that pig, wants to woo you, a cabbage." I disagreed with my brother's assessment. Gu Qingyuan only loved the food I made, and I genuinely thought of him as a sweet, tender little piglet with pink pads. I enjoyed spending time with him. My mother was even more protective of Gu Qingyuan. I see that Qingyuan is kind-hearted and humorous. Haven't you noticed how much happier Yunyang seems when she plays with him? My brother, resigned and unwilling, muttered, "He can't marry my sister with this body." I laughed. "Brother, you're overthinking it. Gu Qingyuan is just a good friend. Even though he once dragged me into a dog hole to spy on you and Miss Taifu, you shouldn't hold a grudge." My brother's face instantly turned red, and my mother's eyes sparkled with gossip. But my brother ran off quickly, his angry voice echoing from a distance. "Gu Qingyuan. I always thought Gu Qingyuan only saw me as a friend." However, on the day my brother became the top scholar and paraded through the streets, Gu Qingyuan used the opportunity to declare his feelings for me in front of my mother. At the time, I didn't take it seriously, thinking he was just teasing my mother and me and provoking my brother. To my surprise, the usually food-loving Gu Qingyuan started losing weight for me. Later, I found out he had already expressed his feelings to my brother. My brother coldly responded, "If you don't lose weight, it's not going to work." In the first year, he lost 10 pounds and looked a bit more handsome. He excitedly came to our new home and said, "Yunyang, wait for me." My brother gave him a disdainful look. In the second year, he was dispatched to Jiangnan to manage flood control, and I didn't see him for a whole year. My brother, while looking at the dowry list for the Taifu residents, grumbled, "The little fatty doesn't know if he can endure this hardship." In the third year, he still hadn't returned. I heard he was building dams in Bashu, which made me uneasy since Bashu is known for its beautiful women. My brother, while examining the local specialties Gu Qingyuan had sent, complained to my sister-in-law and mother, "This little fatty is still so childish. just playing with trinkets. He doesn't even bother to come back and see us. In the 4th year, my sister-in-law gave birth to twins, and the whole family was overjoyed. My brother, touching the baby's tiny, soft hands, complained to his friend Gu Qing'an, "Is your fatty brother ever coming back?" Several young masters have come to propose to Yunyang. Feeling a bit lonely, I went to the backyard to calm myself. There was a tall persimmon tree there, and Gu Qingyuan loved the persimmons from this tree the most. As a breeze blew, leaves fell on my head. I reached up to pick them off, but someone beat me to it. Looking up, I saw familiar eyes and a figure that had grown tall and slender, no longer the plump rice ball. Gu Qingyuan hadn't been lying to me. He really did look good after losing weight. Standing under the autumn sun, he smiled at me. "Yunyang, I've finally lost weight. Can I marry you?" My heart warmed, and wanting to hold on to this happiness tightly, I smiled and replied,
Yes.
"My brother has missed you, and I've missed you too."